Good morning, and thank you very much for joining me at this morning's workstream session, looking at how you can accelerate your funnel with a dynamic customer view. My name's Simon Knight, and I'm UK Product Marketing Manager at Dun & Bradstreet UK for Sales and Marketing Integration Solutions. And for those of you who are maybe not familiar with Dun & Bradstreet, we're a provider of business information solutions which help companies manage their risk, supply management and sales and marketing activities using the information we collect, update and aggregate on over 200 million records globally. So what is the essence of today's solution? Well, it's really about using real-time data to improve your lead management processes. So really changing the shape and velocity of your funnel to make your funnel more effective and more efficient, and ultimately to convert more leads. I would describe today's session as marketing operation agnostic. What I mean by this is that you could be at very different stages of looking how you can improve your funnel from a position where you haven't got any processes, systems in place at the moment to manage it, through to maybe you've embedded marketing automation technology. Well, actually the principles and techniques I'm going to cover today apply whichever stage you're at. And even if you're thinking maybe we're there because of implemented marketing automation technology, one of the first sessions of today's program described that less than 3% of marketing automation deployments have been rated as excellent. So there's certainly room for improvement there. And also, while we're very much talking about the lead management cycle today, the tools also apply as the lead is handed off into sales and the CRM environments and into the customer life cycle, and we'll see how that helps and benefits businesses in the next few slides. So this is possibly a controversial slide, considering it's the inaugural event of the Funnel Conference. But I actually think, unfortunately for many organisations, this is a reality. So the number of organisations who have implemented lead management or marketing automation technology are still relatively few. And as a result, many leads generated by marketing are passed through to sales and not worked. And we've got evidence to suggest that it's in the order, in certain companies, of 70 to 80% of leads go untouched by sales. And when you consider that typically 50% of marketing budget is spent on lead generation activities, this is an awful lot of investment which is literally going straight down the drain. So looking at those reasons why maybe sales aren't working the leads in some detail, I think it comes down to three factors. So first of all, and we'll hear this throughout the day today, buyers that are engaging with you are not ready to buy typically. Also, we have the situation where maybe it's the wrong type of lead, so it doesn't fit your target customer market. And thirdly, lack of information on the lead, so really not knowing much about that lead to have a decent conversation with them. And some research which was done by MEC Labs, who are part of the Marketing Sherpa Group, identified data as the single most important factor which can make a difference in your success of your lead generation programs. So let's have a look at the reasons behind the sales indifference or inertia to the marketing generated leads to understand the platform for moving forward. So I think there are internal and external factors which influence this sales inactivity on leads. But I think for me, if we look at particularly external factors, the main one for me is really the change in buyer behaviour over the last few years, particularly with the advent of Web 2, where it's more common now to engage with peers, industry groups, etc., to help purchasing decisions. But there are also some other factors here. So first of all, it's second nature now to begin searches, whether it's in our consumer or business lives, online, with engagement with sales actually much later on in the process. And when they do eventually, if and when they do eventually engage with you, one of the characteristics of that engagement, they'll actually share very little information with you. So that's one of the problems we've got to contend with. again, 90% of prospects won't be ready to buy, so we have to keep front of mind with them until they are in a position to do so. And I think particularly because of the economic conditions over the last few years, the B2B sales cycle has increased by over a fifth. And for good measure, there are maybe for some decision-making decisions, there are 2 to 3 additional people involved in that process that we need to consider. So there's a paradox here that buyers are trying to keep sellers at arm's length until they're ready, but ultimately as marketers we've got to try and understand them in more detail to engage with them and start building that relationship. And relationships are key to really getting over this new buyer ecosystem, and ultimately to build relationships, to build trust, to communicate with them and understand their requirements. We need to understand them in more detail, and ultimately this is where data can really play a part. In also looking at how we can improve the funnel, I think we can also learn a lot from the bottom of the funnel, in particular in the sales world with regards to CRM deployments. Now, the CRM market is a very mature market. I think last year it was in the order of $16 to $17 billion industry globally. But as the Gartner and the Director magazine quotes that you can see indicate, a fair number of CRMs have had problems and have maybe not delivered the anticipated benefits, with the main underlying reason being bad data. Technology has greatly improved over the last 10 years, and the likes of Salesforce have done a great job in making the solutions more accessible through cloud-based technology, and this has made it easy to implement and cheaper. And I think this has been really an underlying cause of some of the failures, and some of the failures with bad data, because things like the processes, the people and the data have been largely ignored in implementations, and as a result the symptoms have been poor data quality in CRM systems. So for any of those of you who interact with a CRM system, you'll be familiar with the issues that are listed at the bottom of this slide here. Particularly in the sales community, it spawned one particular memorable LinkedIn group called Why Sales Hate CRM, which elaborates on those points in a lot more detail. So I think the big danger when we look at jumping in and how we improve the funnel is that we lead with technology, where in fact it needs to go hand in hand with the other things that we've mentioned. In certain organisations now, data has become a high priority with the appointment of roles such as data stewards, who are responsible for governing the data end to end across the business. If we now return to the top of the funnel, we'll start to see how the lead generation activities across your multi-channels then start to drive leads into your funnel. So at the top, we the leads that you'll be bringing in, whether they're online or coming to you, for example, inbound via telephone, will have different levels of data available with them. Particularly the digital leads will have maybe more unstructured data, such as social media analytics and web analytics, in addition to the, I guess, traditional data types around the individual and the company. But all this data is very useful in determining who the lead is, what they want, and when they want it. But I'm going to focus for the next couple of slides on company data specifically, because I think for many organisations who maybe haven't implemented or invested in social media monitoring and maybe the web tools, this is data they're familiar with, and data which can be improved in a relatively simple way. However, as things stand today, it's really hard to get the granularity of data which is useful in the downstream management of those leads. For example, web users don't want to be faced with tens of data elements to complete, and there's lots of evidence that the more you ask for from a visitor, the more the risk of abandonment of that form and maybe taking their business elsewhere. But even if they've contacted you via a telephone, for example, the challenge is to capture the data which might be more prevalent, but do it in a quick, efficient and reliable way. If you had the level of granularity of data that you need, it can start to benefit you in two broad areas, irrespective of whether that lead is being passed straight through to sales or indeed entering a lead nurture program. So the first benefit is really around sorting out the irrelevant leads. So the leads which maybe are not part of your core market, maybe leads that you can deprioritize if not dispose of altogether. And the second benefit is really around having a better conversation. So from a sales perspective, understanding them in more detail and maybe personalising the conversation. But from a lead nurture program, when you're looking at maybe how to react to that organisation, the content to drip feed through to them, that also can play a much better part in personalising that conversation. So we understand that all this data is available. We want to try and improve our position with regards to company data to improve our decision making. And the simplest way of doing this is really to capture the right level of information up front. So how are we going to make this a reality without impacting the end user, whether that be a visitor to your website or maybe somebody internally entering this data? Well, if we look at this scenario here, this is really around a web form or indeed a front end to a lead management system. And we're going to capture the details of the visitor in this instance. I think we're familiar with consumer address validation type web forms where you put your postcode in and your home details are returned. And at the very simplistic level, you can think of this as a business validation service, but although in reality it's offering a lot more information. So the form looks like standard. Built into this form is API or data as a service technology, which I'll come back to in a second. But the user will complete the form as standard. The key difference here being the company name field, which upon selection and input, then triggers a request to what's called the DaaS or Data as a Service platform. And the Data as a Service effectively is a technology which allows you to transmit real-time data over the internet and embed it into your systems, web forms and processes. And behind the Data as a Service platform is D&B's global data engine, which takes information from over 30,000 data sources globally to make 1.5 million updates on the 200 million companies that we have available via our platform. So in this case, the DaaS platform will bring back a list of matching company names. So my office is in Marlow in Buckinghamshire, and upon selecting that entity, two things will happen. So firstly, and probably the most obvious, the rest of the form will be completed. But secondly, and certainly transparently to the end user, it can bring back up to 90 other data elements on that company, which can then be captured immediately in your lead management solution or your CRM solution. So the result of this is turning almost anonymous leads into leads which you can understand and decide what to do with very quickly.